you didn't start behind a stove. You started, from what I understand and what I read, you started behind a camera lens.
Yeah.
What drew you to filmmaking in the first place?
In itself, I just always want for me, I was always fascinated with the idea of not just creativity, but the idea that we can create another lens in which to view the world and inspire people and feel inspired through new thoughts. With film, you're creating a whole new world in which it's an escape from the world that you're living in. And for me, I always found that really, really interesting to tell stories that haven't been told, whether through screenwriting, through cinematography, um, just the idea of creating new ideas and sharing those with people and having that as I was always super inspired through watching films, some great directors. I always thought there's a lot of magic behind the effort and the thought and the discipline and the creativity that goes into making a film, right? And even the editing process. For me, that was just very freeing. And I didn't want to be actually in front of the camera. I wanted to be behind the camera. I always wanted to be a writer director. So I wanted to tell stories, create characters. I'm in love with colors and fashion and music and making it all pair together. It's pretty incredible when you do it right, you can transport people to a new place. And so yeah, that was it. I just wanted to create. And that was the first thing that I felt was a direction in which, oh, that's like the best way to create things is to design characters and screenplays and do it through a lens, and that was what I was really fascinated with.
Did that come natively to you, or was there someone, something that drew you to it?
I've always been into art and, like, I've always been creative, and I've always liked building, drawing, painting, photography, even when I was, like, 3, 4, 5 years old. So I think that was just kind of inherent in my bones. Um, yeah, I was always drawn to art, and film is a type of art, it's a medium. So,
Yeah. And then, so you were what age when you studied film? You were in that realm?
it was I was basically 20. I went to a year of communications college, and then I transferred to, Ryerson in Canada and went to film school. And I graduated when I graduated, I was 17. I turned 18 the next, like, couple months, so I was, like, one of those young kids, um, the youngest in my grade. But yeah, I started young and, I spent time on sets and spent time in school, and then I decided that I needed a full-time job outside of that because, like, it's an ambitious thing to wanna be a director, um, or to make films. So, that's when I started cooking, which is another outlet of creativity where I was like by the way, I was super young, so therefore, I was also a bit naive in the sense that I thought, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I'll still pursue this passion over here," which truly is my passion. I love the idea of being, a filmmaker, but I was naive in the sense that I could also simultaneously pursue a day job, thinking that, like, being a chef was an actual day job, and
Right.
clearly it's not, right? And clearly it demands, like, every ounce of you. Um, but I also fell in love with cooking, and then that's how, like, there was a shift and where my pursuit went.
Created the scripts to the saucepans?
Yeah, I felt like there was a void in cooking, and this is also, like, at the time, I felt like I could fill a role, and basically, I thought I could do what I was doing with film and, like, try to interject myself and have a voice and and create authentic creative work. I also felt I could do the same thing with cooking and tell stories and be imaginative. Like, a lot of, like, the way that I approach cooking is imaginative. And, like, I like to start with a blank canvas and be like, "Well, what can we do?" Clearly, there's a responsibility to not bastardize food, ingredients, techniques, culture. Like, all those things have to get baked into the process. It's not just about, like, it can't be fluff, but at the same time, I feel that there was a lot of opportunity to create, and that excited me. And, you know, I worked some inspiring chefs, so I felt like that was the path that I should take, and I took it. And I'm happy
Yeah.
where I'm at.
And you never you mentioned this original idea of storytelling that drew you to it. Um, and that really is what you continue to do anyway. While you changed industry, you were still doing the same thing you set out to do. But like you say, the medium was different. The tools changed, but that you still had the same objective of telling stories. Why? What was the idea of telling a story going to do that impacted you?
It's not really just about telling a story. In fact, I think there's a lot about telling a story that for me is a little cringy, especially when you adopt it to food culture and restaurants, and we can talk about that more in depth, but in terms of, like, you know, tableside dissertations and, like, trying to really force a connection between the guest and the food and yourself and, like, how you came up with something, and a lot of that isn't really necessary. Same as with film, like, it could be totally unnecessary just to create stories or tell stories. I think what drew me to both mediums, cooking and film, was the idea that I could create or participate in something that had never been done before. And that sounds like, you know, it's really ambitious, but it's also that's what excited me, you know, was is like the approach to like telling a story that would like just shock people in a positive way, in the sense of just unapologetic creativity. And that sounds kind of dramatic, and it can be. It sounds pretentious, but I think like a lot of the most inspirational music musicians and storytellers and filmmakers have that effect on people, and that's, like, what excites me about not just the storytelling, but the visual aspect of it and, like, the emotional connection to it, and there's a lot that has to go into an experience to make all those things happen, to make something unforgettable.
Mm. And around that moment when you decided, like, okay, you've got this part-time job, you're in college or finishing college, you realize I can't really be a part-time chef. You decided to lean fully into that and go all in. What was the decision on that and why? Did you have to let go of anything as well in that process?
I've never been the kind of individual that just wants to do one thing, by the way. I've never just been the kind of human that's just like, "Man, my whole career is just gonna be doing this thing, and that's what's gonna make me happy." Um, However, I there's a lot of I'm quite satisfied with the progress of my career and where I'm at, and I wanna continue to, create a uniqueness for myself that feels like I have an authentic brand that's personable. Um, but with regard to, like, when that, like, aha moment was, you know, I worked with a Swiss chef way back in the day, actually for hotel, for 4 seasons way back in the day, and it's a Swiss chef that was just super, super organized and had tons of amazing technique, and, you know, he was Swiss hotels trained, he was very old school, and he was just very buttoned up, and he just had a savviness about his approach to everything, and I was brand new, and I was still in culinary school. I went to culinary school, and I dropped out. But while I was in culinary school, I was working as, like, a banquet chef, and we were doing 350 people, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and when I say every day, I mean, I would work, like, a month straight without a day off. I would work 17-hour days with and this is before it's, like, super HR and people there wasn't a whole lot of complaint there, it's like, we were just getting the job done, and I'd have, like, 100 hours of overtime on a single paycheck. But point is I don't know, he was just like I was like, "This guy, he's passionate, he's got an amazing skill set, it's beautiful to watch him teach, to train, to cook, to inspire." It just kinda got bit by the bug, and then, of course, I love to eat. You know, that's the other part about it is, like, I love eating food, tasting food, experiencing new food, new textures. Food's a big part of my life, so I think it was very holistic in the sense that I fell in love with the practice of it, but also enjoy, you know, the other end of it.
And letting go of that idea of filmmaking, was that tough? You know, your childhood kind of dream in a sense, your first love. Was that a
Yeah,
challenge? Was that hard?
it's super hard. I mean, I think about filmmaking all the time, and I think about, you know, it's a totally different field. but at the same time, I was very unapologetic about my approach to pursuing cooking, and I made a lot of sacrifices deliberately, obviously, to get to where I'm at and, like, to make sure that my trajectory was where I wanted to be. So in that aspect, yeah, like, it kinda sucks. You know, I definitely wish that I could do both, you know,
Right.
that I could be this, like, amazing director and put a lot, because I have a lot of creativity that I wanna get out, and it's like, you can't just I'll do it all on a plate. But, you know, I didn't complain about it, and I love what I do, and I've always
Yes.
loved what I've done. I mean, I was, you know, over a decade in Michelin kitchens, and, like, you can't just do that. 3 Michelin.
No.
You can't just do that with just being like, "Yeah, this is a
This is the thing I'm
byproduct
gonna
of
do.
what I really." Yeah, you
Right.
have to be fully
No
committed
side
in
hustle.
order to do that for, like, a couple weeks, let alone decades.
Right.
So
Yeah. I wanna unpack that a little bit later and the sacrifice of success involved in that, for sure. There's a deep layer to uncover in there that I think our audience would love to hear about. Um, so skipping a few jumps down the road here, you invented floating food, and that sentence still sounds quite absurd. What does it
yep.
take to chase something that bizarre and still pull it off?
Well, look, it's awesome. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I think what's more impressive than the actual feat is the idea of, you know, my approach to creativity is like what I call front running. It's kind of like an ode to Steve Prefontaine, the track runner who, I don't know if you know about him, but like his whole style, he broke a lot of records, and he was a he ran track at Oregon, and then his coach was Bill Bowerman, who later, you know, created Nike. But Steve's approach was, look, when I start a race, I'm going to start in front, and I'm never going to stop until I win the race, which is absurd for a lot of reasons, right? You're letting people draft on you. It's like you're using up way too much energy. Like nothing about it really makes any sense. But the idea has always has been a huge inspiration for me, is that, you know, he had a philosophy that I start in front and I finish in front, period, no matter what. And yeah, I'll burn up more energy, but this is my strategy. And what I take away from that is like you have to be unapologetic about your ideas and your pursuit, because everybody wants to pull you back. Everyone wants to be like, it's a dumb idea. You shouldn't do it. It's been done before. It's impossible. And blah, 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 blah. But you can't start new paths, and you can't change trends or start trends, and you can't be ahead of the game if you're not front running. So I always call it front running. So creating a the balloon was one of those things where I was like, I had this idea. It was basically from being obsessed with film and Willy Wonka. And, you know, that idea was in my mind. And you know, Alinea was the platform in which I knew I could start pursuing it, because it was such a think tank, and the expectation of me was to invent and create every day, and our guests demanded it. You know, it was always about pioneering. And so it was exhaustive kind of process, but I think the aha moment of not creating the balloon was the aha moment of like, and it sounds so cliche, it's like people always tell you, it's like, it can't be done, and there was a large track record of people telling me it couldn't be done, right? When I was doing it, I would hear, I had a lot of, chef friends in Spain and still do, and they're like, "Oh, Ferran and Albert tried to do that, they couldn't do it," and it's like, and that's kind of fair, it's like, "Oh, these guys couldn't do it," they're like, that's a long shot. Um, but the aha moment for me was, like, knowing that, again, like film, like when I talk about film, it's like you're creating a blank canvas and storytelling with cinematography, music, and design and characters and wardrobe and all these things. You create a world that nobody's ever seen before. That's what I like about food, and that's what I do with the balloons. Like it's never been done before. It creates. I love the idea of the opportunity and the possibility of doing things that have never been done before. And I think people are intimidated by that because it's an intimidating process to try to do that. but it's totally possible. And so the balloon, more so than the creation of it, was the recognition of the possibility that it was achievable. And like that's where like I get really excited. So now it's like, okay, now what's next?
Did you ever come close to saying, screw this whole floating balloon idea? It's not working. What was the process? Did you like, was there many failed attempts or did you get it pretty early on? Or, what was the actual steps of that ideation into execution?
Do you know Dave Barron, who was he was a former CDC of Alinea. He has Pasjoli in LA. He's a former Alinea chef. Really nice guy, and I worked with him for a while. And he had left Alinea to go open Next, which is like the sister restaurant of Alinea. And he opened Next, and really cool concept over there. And when I was taking the helm at Alinea, I remember I got promoted to exec chef, and I went to go have a beer with him at this place called The Store in Chicago. And he was like, "All right, well, what are you gonna do?" Basically, and he asked me this question, I'll never forget it. And the reason he asked is because like whoever's in charge there under Grant is always responsible as like this kind of creative director, and like, you know, Baron had a lot of influence over the menu and did some really cool dishes, some really inspiring dishes while he was there, and he kinda just had that pointed question at me, was kinda like, "Alright, now it's your turn. What are you gonna do?" And I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to do the balloon, but I hadn't even really put that much effort into pursuing it yet, and so I was like, "I think I'm gonna make edible, floating food." And, I remember saying it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, just got off work, and, hearing myself say it out loud was kind of like, "Oh, okay, now I'm kind of, like, in
Now
it.
you're committed.
Now I'm committed." So but yeah, after that, went back, and at that time, the restaurant was closed, once a week, so I used that day off to bring in hydrogen and helium tanks and, try to inflate sugar, and worked it out pretty quickly. I think it was just the push to, like, get some gas into the hydrogen was a problem, but I brought helium in, and I don't know, it probably took a couple months, but it worked out.
How many balloons do you think they made to date?
Well, they're doing typically 130 people a night, and they're open 7 days a week. That's over 330,000 a year.
Yeah. Bit.
Yeah.
How many guys you got on the balloon section?
You know, the balloon section was the one of the most violent, just anxiety-inducing stations, which is so ironic, by the way, right? When you think
Because you're
about it,
getting a balloon, right? Like a childlike balloon. Yeah.
you think of, like no, but, like, in terms of the kitchen, like, you think of, like, old French Brigade and
Right.
Ramsay or Guy Savoy or, Ducasse, or, like, maybe some old school kitchen in which, like, you're intimidated to work meat section and get the temps right, whatever. The balloon station would wipe any of those stations off the face of the earth. You know, when the expediter turns to you and goes, You're picked up on 12 balloons, and you're trying to inflate sugar on an edible string and walk it through a dining room." It's a lot of, like it's funny. It's funny how that became, like, an aggressive station.
Yeah. I get goosebumps thinking about that. How do you navigate the process and the line between science and storytelling, like while still retaining substance? Because I think that's something important to discuss. A lot of restaurants over the years and decades have done great things. Some have pushed boundaries. Some have pushed boundaries and failed because there's no substance, and it becomes this just cloud-like idea that looks great but lacks relevance and depth to it. But I think one of the things Alinea is known for is pushing the boundaries of science, still retaining an element of integrity of the story of what it's trying to communicate, but retaining substance and delivering at the end of it. How do you navigate the line between those?
I don't, the reason I don't is because, you're talking historically about my role there, and my role there was, like, they were known as a think tank. They were known as one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive restaurant in the history of the world, right? And so I didn't have to spend too much effort wondering whether or not the storytelling component was going to have value, because it's so baked into the culture. so baked into the expectation, um, from not only from a guest standpoint, but from an operator standpoint, from an for motivating the staff and who was coming there from all over the world to work and participate in that environment. But Alinea was an anomaly for me, and I was classically trained, so I spent a lot of years being classically trained way before I even went there. When I went there, I called it my finishing school. I just didn't expect to spend 10 years there or almost 10 years. So that was the only caveat with that. Um, but I don't storytelling is a very kind of I use that word cautiously because, like you're saying, it can have an ill effect on the messaging. And as a chef, there's a million responsibilities as a chef, but most of them rely on just product ingredients and doing as little as possible um, to Earth's bounty to make sure that it tastes delicious. And there's a lot of other factors that go into an experience, but as a chef, you know, I don't personally spend too much time about storytelling at all, including now. Um, my storytelling is more about what is responsible to the concept. And so when I left Alinea, I spent a few years consulting and traveling, trying to determine what my next step was to opening a restaurant, um, which is a bit abnormal for chefs. I feel like at that level, it's always about a race to go open your next thing. And I was very deliberate about my approach to take a big step back and determine, you know, what responsibility I had as chef and what did I think that I wanted to do. And I wholeheartedly believe in concepts, which is why I entered the bar space. And then I did a holistic concept. And like I'm trying to, it needs to have the storytelling part has to be natural to the concept. You can't have like, and this is my opinion, of course, but you can't have a brick and mortar that has a concept kind of written down that you have to constantly pursue how to make people feel as if there's validity to it by, like, constantly storytelling. Storytelling should be very, very natural and holistic, and that as soon as you walk into an environment, you're 1,000% bought in immediately. You know where you're at, you know what you're doing, you know how it feels. It's all like that's, like, what true hospitality is, in my opinion, and and I think we're moving away from maybe the definition of what fine dining used to mean and what the expectations to what fine dining used to mean versus what it can mean or could mean.
Agreed.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess idea of storytelling, yeah, it's certainly a word that's been overused, that's for sure, in the past 5 years. There's words around it, but essentially it's not even necessarily a story of a dish, but an individual, a narrative. They call it PR press bio or whatever it might be, like the encapsulation of who you are and more importantly, why you do what you do. Not even just as a plate of food, but like who you are. What are you known for? Or what do you want to be known for? I guess that coming from that background that you spent a decade there with Alinea, certainly the common denominator within that realm is innovation to the nth degree and creativity. Do you still carry that on? That still a integral part of who you are as a chef,
Oh,
or
yeah.
is that redirected in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the all the things that I've learned throughout my career, I hold on to them. I hold on what's worked for me, what's not worked for me. But there was an insane amount of discipline attached to my day to day, and there still is, obviously, and I'll never abandon that. I mean, I'm constantly trying to become a better human, a better father, a better husband, a better chef. I'm constantly feel like that's the purpose of life is to constantly evolve and become, you know, more efficient, better at what you're doing and try to so those processes that I learned were super, super discipline forward, technique driven, very, very necessary in order to execute at a very, very high level, regardless of what was on the plate. Right? It was a symphony um, of discipline, and we opened the doors at that place at 4:45 in the afternoon. When I was running the kitchen, I was the executive chef and the pastry chef, um, writing a lot of the creativity, doing all the training, and it's a it teaches you how to handle a lot of pressure, and and I actually thrive under that, and that's something that I'll never forget, and I'll always be grateful for, was the, like, opportunity to kind of see if I could bend or break under that, and my expectations are, like, really high, so no, I took a lot from it that I apply every single day.
Yeah.
Um,
Creativity is an interesting one as well when it's in the parameters of intense pressure, right? It's like, I mean, I always say that creativity's it's fire. It's but you need a container, otherwise it burns the fucking house down. And for me, that's and with us, it's that's systems, so that when the idea, the creative idea comes, it has somewhere to land. Um, and I think that's prevalent in a lot of individuals that are creative individuals that actually do something with it. You know, ideas are sexy, but execution is often lonely. I think the people that really last are the ones who learn how to fall in love with both of them. And coming from that place and who you are as a cook, that's obviously extremely innovative, driven by creativity. Where do you find that balance, and how do you transition from ideas? I don't know about you, but for me, like, you know, there's always ideas. There's no shortage of ideas. You know, I've got lists upon notes in my phone of ideas about fucking everything, you know, throughout the day. I write shit down, but taking that into execution and knowing what's the difference between an idea that you should do and you shouldn't do, how do you approach that?
well, several ways. One way is that I'm I fail, like, constantly, like, I fail, I would say 99% of the time in terms of but that's the process. That's what I call the process, is like, I'm actually excited to hurry up and fail so that I can figure out what went wrong and where I need to go. And to answer your question, determine if it's worth pursuing. It's often usually worth pursuing. It's just a matter of, do you have the skill set and the ability to recognize why and how it went wrong, or the maturity to be like, this isn't exactly where it needs to be, instead of serving it, or saying it's good enough, is to recognizing that it's not good enough and it needs more and more and more revisions. It's like any sort of form of architecture or engineering or, filmmaking. And so for me, like, I love that process. So that's one angle that I have, which, like, I think the first time a chef gets on the creative process of anything, and and he's new, or she's new to her career, it's very easy to, not have the experience and suggest that, okay, this is good enough right now. But it takes a lot of experience, discipline, and maturity to constantly be throwing things away, not because from ego, but from the necessity that it's not right.
Right. You've developed a set of standards.
Yeah, just a level of high standards. And it's really exciting to watch that process. It's exhausting, but there's nothing more beautiful than, the end goal of when you finally get there. It's super frustrating when you spend a lot of time on something and then you literally crumple it up and throw it in the trash. But when you finally get to the final product and it's exactly the way you want it, it's priceless, and that's what it's all about. That's what the whole point of the process. And then the other thing is, I don't listen to noise. you know I'm super unapologetic about my process. I'm very head down. I block out noise, and I just keep attacking, and I put a and, like, I absorb the pressure, and I push, and I push, and I push, and, like, that's what I think any great artist does. It's what I think that's the epitome of creation, is there's just the nonstop pursuit unapologetically to get to where you need to go. It's easy to get distracted and derailed, and so, like, I'm really proud of my ability to, you know, not be, deterred.
Right. You're still persistent on that regardless of what day of the week it is. Yeah. I think that right there is that one of the common things that people misinterpret, don't fully understand a lot of the time. Being creative when you're inspired is quite easy, but when you're doing it relentlessly every day, and it's part of who you are, and you're there, as you say, at 2 a.m. when you're fucking exhausted. Things are falling apart. You've got these non-negotiable deadlines and people coming into the restaurant, the VIPs and pressure, and everybody's expecting this masterpiece on demand. That's almost a fine line between not being art anymore. It's there's a level of discipline and execution to actually deliver it, because just all these fluffy ideas without the ability to lock down and fail repeatedly until you get the outcome is something that's missing a lot of the time, I think. Is that always in you?
I mean, I've always been very resilient, and resiliency is one of my, like, wheelhouse, skill sets, is to take, a certain level of abuse when it comes to maybe some self-doubt or pressure or anxiety or, you know, whatever it may be that comes my way. I'm very good at, like, absorbing that. I was very physical my whole life, played a lot of team sports my whole life, physical sports. I've always had a high amount of discipline and work ethic in everything I've done, and I've that's always kinda carried through. Um, so I think that's really important in the professional world as well.
Right. There's always a lot of noise, right?
A lot of noise, it's easy to rely on other people, and so it's like anything in life, it's easy to say, "Well, I'll get it done tomorrow," or "This is good enough," etcetera, but for me, that's, like, my biggest kind of fear is feeling as if I'm complacent or as if
You could have done better.
I could have done better, like, for me, that makes me like, my wife will tell you I'll stay awake all night. If I reflect on something that wasn't done properly or that I wasn't super pleased about or maybe just, like, sometimes I'll just lay in bed thinking about, in an excited way, how to improve something, and it kinda gets it's not nearly something to brag about, but it's part of who I am and how my processes work.
Mm. What's the cost of all this? All this pursuit, this pressure and, mentally, physically, emotionally? Has there ever been a cost attached to that for you?
No, I mean, like I said, it's life itself is costing and taxing in a metaphorical way and in a literal way. I think the beauty lies in finding a way through that. I know that sounds very kind of spiritual. I'm also very spiritual, but life's short, and like what we do matters and how we apply ourselves and make a difference matters. And I really believe that. And I hope that whatever I do, I can always give part of myself back to the community and the world. And that's what a lot of my satisfaction and pursuit comes from, is this idea that I can have a voice or a uniqueness that resonates. And the commitment to that is I have full commitment. And so if I get taxed or there's cost associated with stress or sleepless nights or, missing out on some certain family time here and there or whatever the sacrifices may be, that's all baked into my acknowledgement in order to continue to pursue what it takes to evolve.
Right. Presume it takes a pretty strong partner in life to be okay with that too and by your side. Are you married? What's your story
Yep.
on that side of things? Married, one daughter?
Yeah, one daughter. My wife, Kat, is amazing, and she's a freelance writer and lifestyle writer, food writer. And she's really well known in the writing community. She works for a lot of major publications, and we have a lot of the same passions. And we're working on a new restaurant together, and we feed off each other. We just have amazing energy, and I didn't we didn't I was you know I was almost 40 when I got married, so I spent a lot of my life figuring out who I was before I felt that it was necessary to introduce somebody else to my chaos. And so yeah, we have an amazing relationship. We have an amazing daughter. She's super inspiring too, and so I have my own kind of career and trajectory, but all of that is kind of is it's not meaningless, but in comparison to the kind of effect that I can have on her now, there's like a whole new, a whole new way of life that I'm excited about. So it's really cool.
Yeah. I think that's another common challenge, let's say, in the world of hospitality relationships for many chefs, um, and industry folks. What do you think are like the important things around that, about choosing the right partner, about being with the right person? Any advice to
That's it's
anyone in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, in short, you need to find a partner that's willing to support you. And when I say that, yeah, like I don't think it's like we talk about hospitality a lot in terms of like it being the super toxic culture, which obviously there's truth to it. It's very antiquated industry in terms of its advancement, whether it's with technology or ideas, I feel but my advice would be like I don't feel any different about a musician, whether, you hear these stories about like Bruce Springsteen, sitting in the studio for like 48 hours straight with his entire team trying to record the perfect album, right? I don't see the distinction there between that and a chef. And I think anybody who's driven and wants to be the best at what they do, whether they're an architect, a dancer, um, a chef, an engineer, whatever you're passionate about and want to be at the top 1% because you want to make a difference in your field. Those individuals are always unapologetic about what they want to do. So I don't think it's necessarily wed to just chefs. I feel like people who it applies to everybody. So you need to have a partner that's willing to be like, yeah, this person's dedicated, to me, but also to the craft in which they pursue. And once you have that, it's easy.
Is anything ever that easy? Who knows? Probably not. No one wants
Yeah.
to find that out anyway. We talked about art and being an artist. I'm sure over your career you've developed a lot of hits, let's say, with the crowd, the balloon, the hot potato, cold potato from Millennia, etc. Um,
Hot potato, cold potato is Grant's dish.
right,
That was one of his signatures.
right.
Um,
But I'm sure you
but yeah,
cooked hell of a lot of them.
I've got a lot of bangers out there.
Right. I'm interested in that because the artist always wants to keep moving, keep evolving, but when you create like that and things do super well and they land with the world and they applaud that, I'm curious what's harder for you? Is it letting go of a dish that people worship or trying to outdo it?
I don't have I don't really let go too much. I mean, sometimes I get, you know, events in which people want the balloon, so I'm happy to do it. But in general, like I'm excited. What excites me is the pursuits of something new, new concepts, new ideas. So like no, I don't get emotionally attached to like, you know, things I've created in the past. And in fact, I want to pretty much distance myself from that. No matter how iconic it is, because at the end of the day, you got to like life's about moving on, right?
Right.
And I'm proud of. Again, I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier. Is like for me, what I'm most proud of was not just having the idea to do it, but the courage to make it happen. And I think a lot of people feel like either it's undoable or they listen to the noise or they give up. And like,
Mm.
I think that's the real part of the story that's pretty incredible that's actually, that was a huge boost to my confidence. Oh, and on the balloon, by the way, I don't want to, I feel like I've done a million other cool things since then, but just to touch on one story, that's actually where I met my wife. It was in Aspen.
Right.
And it was when Dana Cowan was running Food and Wine and asked if I could come blow up balloons at the top of the mountain for Aspen Food and Wine, and of course agreed to it. And then after agreeing to it, I realized that I didn't. I was like, "Holy shit!" Is that even possible? Like the altitude's high.
Right.
Like I have no idea. I have no
Oxygen
idea how
levels, all
heal.
that. Right.
Yeah, like I have no idea how helium performs in that environment. So I was kind of like, I was legitimately freaking out. And long story short, this is like, many months before the event, and the idea was that, when I got to Aspen that I would have 2 days to figure out the recipe, so they opened up the gondola early for me, and I took the personal assistant, and I went up to the top of the mountain and, brought all these variations of sugars and all my mise en place and, like and had all these possibility ways of and recipes that I had worked out for cold and humidity and all these things. There's a million recipes based on where you are geographically. Um, so anyway, went up to the top of the mountain and started working out recipes, and none of them came close to working. Like, not even close, and I was having a and they already sold tickets, there's a whole event around it. It was like Wonderland at top of the mountain or something, and so I was legitimately panicking, and, time ran out, and there was, like I went back to the bottom of the mountain and spent the next 2 days working out recipes, and none of them worked. And, it was at it was at 5 o'clock in the morning the day of, and I hadn't said anything, right? So that's another thing. Like, I didn't admit defeat. I wasn't like, "Hey, guys, we gotta cancel this shit because I can't
Right.
figure it out." I
The
just kept
tension's
sle
building.
Oh, yeah, my hair was falling out, and I was like tension was building, and, like, my heart and I hadn't slept, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning the day of the event. And I reverse engineered the entire recipe, and I did basically the whole thing backwards. I recalibrated how I introduced water to the sugar, changed some of the I d re redid the whole thing, and it worked at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I tripled the batch, threw it into pots, and me and the assistant took the first gondola up, and I was like went up to the top of the mountain, grabbed the helium tank, blew it up, and it worked. The event was a huge success. The reason I'm saying that story is because I feel like it's more about the effort made to pursue the idea and make sure that, like, you follow through with it versus like, "Oh, that's a cool dish," and like or like so for me, the aha moment is like anything can be done, which is why I was touching on film earlier. Sometimes film can make you feel that way, it can transport you. It's just like this idea that we're our biggest constraints is the human mind telling us that we can't do something.
Yeah. And so you're not attached to this one idea because your certainty that you're gonna have another great idea is so clear because you've developed the
Hmm.
mentality of pursuit
Yeah.
and doing it until you get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanna do new cool shit,
Right.
you know? Like, I
And you
don't
have
wanna
to
be
let
a
go
one
of
hit
yeah, you gotta let go of everything else to be able to
Yeah.
do that, I guess, right? Sometimes letting go
Yeah.
of your most loved work is the cost of making your most honest work.
Yeah, I mean, look how many people in film or fashion do this. Like,
Right.
you gotta have fun with it. You gotta enjoy it.
Yeah.
You gotta enjoy life, you know? Like, if I sit around and like, "I did such and such 10 years ago, I'm good now." Like, what's the point of
Yes.
living? Like, what else can I
Yeah.
do? And, I wanna have fun. Like, I had fun doing it. I don't have any regrets, to be honest with you. And I try to live that way so that, like, I can enjoy the process. Like, stress aside, at the end of it, there's always, like, the enjoyment part, and that's what I want.
Mm. Yeah, interesting reference to fashion there because it's when you're really looking at like top level fashion, when that like fashion happens in those moments and when they're doing those shows, like most of the world is saying, "What the fuck is that guy wearing? Or what's that girl wearing? That looks ridiculous." And then in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, everyone's got it on, right? Because everyone judges this at the very start, but eventually they catch up. I think that happens a lot in the food world, right? Those who are willing to risk it all, to risk being judged, are the ones who end up leaving a legacy behind.
Yeah. I mean, look how many bangers Frank Lloyd Wright created or, any musician or, every industry, right? So it's not about resting on your
Right.
laurels, it's about just keep going.
Yeah. At what I'm even more curious about is how many he fucked up before that. How many how many mess ups and screw ups and thesis were never seen the light of day. I think there's probably a lot more than people realize. What is it like that Kobe thing that used to take 1,000 shots a day? People only seen him scoring the wins on TV and winning the trophies. They never saw him take the 1,000 shots a day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all about the work that goes into it,
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, it's like, there's a lot of humans out there that want to be on the podium. They wanna have the trophy in their hand. They wanna stand on the podium. But when push comes to shove, a lot of them don't wanna do the work it takes to get there. And that's a huge distinction, right? Because you can't have one without the other. And, um, and so that failing process is like I said, it's my favorite thing because it quickly gets me to where I know where I need to go, right? Like I love failing because it's education. The only way to really educate yourself is to fail, right? That's how I feel, right?
Did your brain
Learn
ever
from
shut
failure,
off?
so to speak. No,
What keeps you from drowning in possibility? Going fucking crazy.
I
Are you
just keep
cool
being
with that?
inspired. Yeah, yeah, I'm totally cool with it. I feel that, like I said, I mean, I feel like life is short, and I think there's a lot of inspiring people in the world, and there's a lot of things, even in this fucking dark place that the world's in for the past since COVID or whatever. This dark, evil energy, this cloud. Aside from that, like, I like to stay inspired. My daughter inspires me, my wife inspires me, my colleagues inspire me. There's a lot of inspiration out there. So I want to keep participating. And so that's like I don't want it to shut off because I mean, don't get me wrong. I know how to have a pina colada on a beach. I know how to take some me time. But I think keeping the mind and the body healthy is the best way to navigate stress and the brain constantly
Right. Talking about
processing.
that, it's really an obsession. Like, for good or bad, whatever
Mm.
it is a certain degree of obsession. And I'm curious, did that ever not serve you? Was there ever a time that caused harm, or that you realized, hold on, I actually need to find a little bit of balance here, or I need to take a bit of me time, or anything around that?
For sure, for sure, when I was in my final years of Alinea, it was taxing me in a way that was super unhealthy, you know, in the sense that, well, first of all, like I wasn't eating right, you know, and I was on my feet all day, as always, right? So I've been in this industry for, just under 30 years. So like most of my life I've been standing on my feet. But yeah, there was a time when I was getting ready for my departure that I could look at myself in the mirror and had a lot of inflammation. I was mentally and physically kind of exhausted. Um, so not to be hypocritical, but that's a good example of where like I needed to turn it off, but it wasn't turn off. But my body was like, dude, turn this fucker off. But I wasn't, you can't. It's either you quit or you don't quit. Um, I've never been a human. I've never been the person to be like, "Hey, man, I need to take like a week for myself." Like those words have never come out of my mouth. And so, like, long story short, yeah, like that was my last 3 years there. I could tell that, like, it was taking a physical toll on my health. Um, and I'm really resilient, but I could see that, like, my diet, my nutrition, my mental state was kind of I was meeting a crossroads. I either needed to change it or basically let it consume me, and that would be a downward spiral.
Mm, that's a dance that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obsession that ultimately builds your empire. But if you don't pause sometimes to realize the cost of it, it can also burn your kingdom down at the same time.
Yep.
Especially in a world that can condone applauding while that's happening, because the rest of the world doesn't see it. They just see your pursuit, your achievements, and all that is obviously going on internally. You're so conditioned to that behavior, you get caught up in it.
Yeah, I mean, I was conditioned to, I was caught up in it, and there was no escape hatch. until I physically forced one. And, like, as soon as I had left, I had the 1,000-yard stare. Like, for I would say for about a month, I had, like, the 1,000-yard stare, It's like, post-traumatic syndrome, Um, and I changed the way I ate immediately. I eliminated all sugars from my diet, alcohol from my diet. I eliminated processed foods and, unhealthy, like, seed oils, and almost immediately, I had a 180. All my brain fog was gone. I was also taking a lot of supplements, but I changed, like, what I was physically putting into my body because, like, as a chef, whether you want to or not, you have to taste things, you have to taste sugar. You're inherently subliminally eating a lot of sugar whether you want to or not. Um, you know, and so anyway, I changed the way how I how I ate, and I fixed myself really, really quickly, um, which is amazing. That's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother time. But that was the beginning of a new way for me, and changed my life. And then also, like, I feel like $1,000,000 even today, like, because I stopped consuming toxic things. And then at that point, I was not only was I consuming toxic things, but I was in a probably by definition, just based on hours and stress, a toxic environment, I wouldn't say that the kitchen that I ran was toxic. I would just say the the pursuit of what I was doing, the environment was inherently toxic based on, like, the hours and the stress.
Right. What would give me a bit of context, like, how bad was it? How bad were you? Sorry, not the environment, you and your health, to the point where you obviously got to a stage where you're like, "Shit, I gotta do something about this." How bad was that?
It was just like looking in the mirror and also the way I felt, you know? Um, that was a big part of it. Um, like, sometimes, like, I don't know the best example, but, like, sometimes, change has to sometimes you need to get slapped in the mouth before you, like, realize that you need to, like, do something about it, And
Yeah.
and that's, like, kinda what happened. I was like, so and it wasn't several things happened. One, like, I changed my lifestyle, but two, in order to change the lifestyle, you need to research about it, right? And when you start to research about it, you go down, you learn about the broken food systems, you look about the corruption, you look about the FDA, and you start to learn why the system that we live in even exists. And then you learn about how difficult it is to manage it, navigate that system in order to find but, for me, it was basically a process of elimination, like I told you. Like, first, I started eliminating things that I knew were inherently toxic to me, and then I started introducing things that were beneficial, and together, um, it basically happened. I mean, clearly not overnight. It takes time for the body to adjust and change your gut microbiome, and you have to practice it, and but it was a learning curve for me, in the best way possible, I had to get out of I knew something had to change, I'll put it that way. And the same thing with my style of cooking and, like, what I wanted to do next for my career. Like, change is, like, the most important part of life as well. It's like forcing change.
Yeah.
Um,
It's an interesting, redirect into the next chapter of your life there on that point. You go from three-star restaurant, arguably one of the most forward-moving restaurants in the world, and then you go to Tulum and start growing medicinal herbs. That's a pretty big pivot. Is that connected to that idea of health? Is that what drove that idea, or where did that come from?
yeah, I mean, that was the inspiration is when the original inspiration was, um I was eating medicinally. When I say that, like I said, it's a process of elimination while simultaneously introducing adaptogens, um, mineral-rich items, just proper ingredient sourcing, intermittent fasting, doing a lot of things to make my body just work properly, right? So I was educating myself. But what I learned in that process was like, wow, everything I'm eating is way better than a lot of the shit that I was cooking, which is kind of like embarrassing in a way, right? I come from I was realizing that, you know, because the system's so broken and especially North America, that I was missing out on so much amazing flavor, and not just through fermentation and like I said, abandoning toxic things, but eating more simply, allowed me to focus on minimalism and ingredients in a way that I hadn't done before, but also the delicious factor of just sourcing, um, really really nutritious and delicious ingredients. And then the other thing is, the other reason that that idea came to be was, like I said, when I left Alinea, I didn't have a plan. I knew that I didn't want to immediately walk right out the back door and then right into the back door of another concept. I knew that when it served me and I knew it when it served my customers, because I hadn't done the work that was needed to determine what would the necessary next move was. And that work I decided was to step back and travel, learn about other cultures, and just start over. Like I didn't even know, and by the way, I didn't have any ambition to open a restaurant necessarily. Like I still don't. I'm working on a restaurant right now, but I didn't have any ambition just to open a restaurant so I could show off and like this is my turn. I want to open a restaurant. I want something that's going to resonate with the community and make a difference and be a concept where people can look at and be like, yeah, that's a concept. Um, and it'll last for 10 years and it's new and it's creative, but it's also so so with the Tulum thing, it was kind of like a perfect mix is one that it was a new type of cuisine that I was passionate about in terms of, um, what it was doing for me, but also Tulum is a very holistic environment. It's also international, so going back to, like, creating a concept, it was just perfect. I wouldn't do that concept here in New York.
Right. Give me a little like, in the simplest form, what is the Tulum thing? What are you doing?
Well, that project is off the table.
Right.
So So what I was doing was I was partnering with a hotel, and this is the reason it's off the table is because COVID happened. So the idea was that I was gonna open a restaurant in a hotel in Tulum, and we were pretty far along the way, by the way. And then COVID hit. I was growing a garden, medicinal garden, and the idea was that it was kind of like a food is medicine concept, right? So with fermentations, excuse me, extractions, using techniques to enhance, sauce making vinaigrettes, but using obviously all local and medicinal herbs and medicinal plants and fruits and vegetables, but not necessarily advertising the concept as this like wellness retreat, but just from a culture perspective, introducing it into the bar program and into the food program, and doing it in a way that was subtle and sophisticated so that people felt as if they were participating in something that was delicious, and then later they would learn, "Oh, by the way, there's a whole new approach to why this place exists." That's for me is important because same way as the way I eat, like I told you, eating well and taking care of yourself can be delicious, and it's always pigeonholed into this idea of, like, veganism and and food doesn't have flavor, and it's never had the correct spotlight, so I thought Tulum was the proper platform to do that, and I still think it is. It's very spiritual, it's very holistic, it's international, it just makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, the Mayan community and the jungle and the ingredients there are some of the most medicinal ingredients on the planet. So just everything worked. But unfortunately, COVID came and I had to abandon that project and came back to the US. And that's why I moved to New York. Um, and again, getting into the bar world is also a concept. Using my techniques to help with, izakaya and bar food and drink programs, and for me, it's all about concepts and, like, what I can do to either facelift or re-engineer things that can make a difference to the community versus like, I don't have any ambition of doing a tasting menu.
Right. And tell me about the bar concept. What is that doing when you talk about community? What's the concept behind that, and what's the driver for it?
Well, the driver is that it's probably the most timeless, oldest form of socializing in the world, right? The bar. Like, probably before restaurants, there was bars. So that was the driver, and the other drivers infiltrating that market that I felt hadn't been infiltrated by like a Michelin style chef yet, and say, fine dining and having cocktails are not mutually exclusive. Like, you could have these things, like, and which is what we were talking about earlier, is like fine dining can be reinterpreted a lot of ways, and the old guard isn't necessarily the best way. Like, you can have a lax environment that's fun and social and maybe even loud with pop music, and still have the same auction grade uni that I'm giving you that they're serving down the street at one of the best sushi restaurants in the world, you know? Like, why can't those things happen? So, the idea for me was to kinda give bar food a facelift because it hadn't been done.
Without the white tablecloths and waiters in suits and all that stuff.
Totally, like, people wanna have a good time. You can have an amazing you can have amazing spirits, amazing ice, amazing food, amazing packaging, amazing music, all in one environment without it. And again, I don't pursue accolades, so, like, part of my creativity and my pursuit is, like, I don't have to worry about whether or not Sip and Guzzle is gonna get 3 Michelin stars because I don't care about that. I care about authenticity and having something that the community gravitates to. That's what I want.
What's the next thing? What comes after that?
Facelift to the steakhouse.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's what boils your beef in terms of a steakhouse? Talk to me.
I again, kinda just going back to, you know, facelifts to timeless classic concepts, right? The steakhouse is probably one of the oldest fine dining American venues, right? Where people I wanna make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm not bastardizing culture, and I'm not bastardizing, what's made certain cuisines and cultures successful. Um, and so I try to use my education and experience that I've learned throughout my years of training and just do it for good. And same as like the bar. It's like, hey, the bar world could probably use, a new way of thinking for food. My partner Justin brought me on and he was like, hey, let's do great food here, and that was, like, very humbling, and I was grateful for that opportunity, and we're pursuing that, and the same thing with the steakhouse. It's like, I love steakhouses, but I think there's a lot of things that they could be doing differently,
What's the
and by
biggest
the
thing
way,
that you'd wanna do differently?
well, I don't wanna reveal too much because you
Give us a
know
taste.
I wanna get like, for example, like, Peter Luger's is amazing, and they don't need to change, and they don't wanna change, and I don't want them to change, so I don't have any criticism to the institutions that are doing amazing stuff in New York City. I don't wanna compete with them. I just want to reinterpret, a level of, like, maybe French influence, seasonality, things that sometimes take the back seat in steakhouses with regard to fruits, vegetables, side dishes, and then, of course, techniques that I've learned. So I just wanna kinda, like, revamp it, and do something that also, it's my wife's involved with this project, and it's something that we love steakhouses, so it's kind of, like, close to me. My family's always loved steakhouses. Her family's always loved steakhouses. New York City loves steakhouses. So, you know, like I mentioned a minute ago, I don't have ambitions of just opening a restaurant. I wanna make sure that it's responsible and it makes sense and that the community would want it and that I feel like I could improve maybe some things and I feel like I could still offer creativity. And the same way that I offered creativity to Alinea, I can still do that with Sip and Guzzle and with this new steakhouse and with my consulting. Like I'm never going to stop being creative. So I don't have to lose creativity to participate in something that conceptually has already existed. Izakayas have already existed, have always existed. And I love them, and I love my time spent in Japan. I don't want to do anything but honor those things, not
Mm,
change them.
and but is the food as medicine still influence those other like, does it influence you in whatever you do now? Having gone through that process of learning and education and knowing what you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it influences my daily life, so and my family's life, and I'm not a hypocrite, by the way, like, I try to adopt a healthy lifestyle. At the same time, you and I can go grab some champagne and some pizza after this and go crush, I they're not you can have a happy lifestyle, but have a healthy practice on how you get to where you need to get to. Um, but, with it has more of an effect. So, no, yes and no. Like, I can't introduce necessarily, like, a holistic health approach to probably my steakhouse concept or even to Sip and Guzzle, which is a cocktail bar. It doesn't belong there. It's I don't wanna you don't wanna be, consuming alcohol and then having some bullshit backstory about how there's blue spirulina in one of the cocktails. Like, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't want that. Um, but I learned, like, like, when I was doing tasting menus that throughout my career, by the way, not just a lineage, just throughout my entire career, there was never, like, a responsibility or thoughtfulness into, like, literally putting all 16 plates on a scale, you know? There was never that moment, it's like, "Jesus, how much food are" and by the way, let's say you're 4'10" and you're 175 pounds, and you bring a companion, and they're 6'2", 240. Like, there's not a consideration for, like, the quantity of carbohydrates, sugars, alcohol's processed as sugar, like, having 10 glasses of wine and 16 courses of food, I mean, it's fucking lethal, and there was no consideration to that ever in my culinary career, and that was why, and it's also why I realized why I typically don't like tasting menus. Like, I don't when I go out to eat, I mean, my wife's a writer, so she gets invited to every restaurant on the planet, and I'm consistently turning down an offer to join her because I just don't necessarily love tasting menus at all anymore. I mean, there's definitely a handful of chefs that do incredible tasting menus that I will always go to, but outside of that, like, the omakase is my only favorite tasting menu, and I just don't enjoy sitting in an environment for 3 or 4 hours, drinking copious amounts of wine and just eating agreed upon portions of food that I don't have carte blanche control over. It makes me feel like a hostage, and ultimately, when I don't feel good after that. It takes me days to recover, especially now that I've completely changed my gut microbiome and the way I live and how I eat and the quantity that I eat. If I go eat a tasting menu now,
Yeah.
like a classic French-inspired
Stuck in veins laced with
12
butter for 12
yeah,
weeks after it. You're in like a
it
coma for
takes
3 days.
yeah, oh, yeah. Like, I don't want that shit.
Right. I think it's evolving as well, isn't it? Like, I see less and less. Of course, there's, some of the classics, like you say, won't and probably shouldn't change, but overall, there seems to be a common shift in a lot of cooking that is moving because, as a generation, I think we're becoming substantially more health aware and conscious. Um, and that's definitely a big part of it, with all, everything from oils and fats to sourcing and ingredients. People are aware of these things now and asking the questions where probably it was a degree of unconscious incompetence to begin with, where people don't even really know to ask the questions. Or now, especially with AI and all these things, we've got all that at the touch of a button.
I think it proves that people need to do their own research
Mm.
and everything in life, right? But at the same time, it sucks that if something is FDA approved and it's living on a shelf somewhere, like, it shouldn't be your job to determine whether or not that item is cancerous. Like, that's a huge distinction. There's one thing about doing your own homework and making sure you do what's best for you, but there's a whole nother conversation to be had about, like, being in food deserts that are nothing but, like, processed foods that are only detrimental with empty calories, but yeah, it's good that we're turning a curve now, and it looks like more and more people are waking up, which is great, which will inherently force change.
Mm. Going back in the industry, um, briefly, you talked earlier about toxicity and fine dining glamorizing that to a degree through a lot of places. Whether that was the French classic training or wherever that came from, who knows? But it was glamorized to a degree in some kitchens. What did you take away from that world, and how do you see it differently now?
Could you be more specific? Like, what did I take away from
From intense kitchen environments. You talked earlier, it wasn't like toxic behavior, but it was a toxic environment, intensity of that.
Look, I'm a firm believer that in order to be the best at anything, even if it's personal and, like, not in the pursuit of in the public eye, anything of quality or anything that's gonna force positive change requires a certain level of intensity. Like, I don't have many examples in which, like, a little bit of laziness or complacency or half effort or it takes a lot of physical and mental focus and energy in order to push and make change from a second by second, minute by minute, at least from my own experience. And I'm a huge advocate and beneficiary of of the success of working in environments that are, you know, driven by the push, intensity. But that for me yields the best result, you know?
You feel like there's a
And
lot of pushback against that now in the industry with younger generation coming in, or what's your thoughts about that?
yeah, I mean, it's a tricky subject because, you know, people can misinterpret my opinion as some sort of old guard, antiquated model of like we don't but yeah, like no, I think there's a huge epidemic of kind of laziness in today's culture. And I think social media has bred a lot of it. And I love everybody who works for me, and I treat everybody that works for me with an immense amount of respect, and I try to give them all a platform, and I try to be as inspiring as I possibly can. Um, but at the same time, there are goals. There's goals for myself. There's goals for the business that I operate. There's a lot of goal setting, and in order to get to that, I need myself and the people who are involved with me to participate. Um, and so, but yeah, I see a cultural shift for sure. I've seen a cultural shift for a while. I mean, I'm turning 45 in August, and I started cooking when I was 21. So so I've got to see the pendulum swing pretty hard. When I started cooking, there was no social media. There was no really internet. I mean, there was when I started cooking, there was Amazon where I could buy like books for like $1.99, like awesome books. Um, but I love the game. Like, I got into cooking, like I told you, I was covered in burn marks from opening convection ovens and learning how to cook, like, 12 different cuts of meat, à la carte style for a couple hundred people a night, covered in sweat, with toque hat on, soaked in sweat that I had to keep throwing a new one on, and loving the game, and just nothing but tenacity, and nothing else to, like, pay attention to, just the work, and, like, as we evolved technologically and culturally, there's a shift away from, I think, which by the way, it's not all bad. Like technology is amazing and like shifts are great. But I do personally have always benefited from hard work, and I don't know a shortcut personally. I'm not saying you can't use apps and technology to help you do better inventory and food costing, and I use ChatGPT, and I'm excited about, I I need help. I definitely need help. But there's a distinction between needing help and using technology as a crutch or like using it as like a way of life.
Right. It's about allowing you to do more instead of doing less, right?
Yeah. Like I don't there's no recipe that I know of being hyper successful. I do see an industry that is basically built on the need for quote unquote the push. Like every industry though. And hospitality is easy to target because I think of the hours and like the physical labor required. But I don't but so, it's a complex conversation. But I think at the end of the day, I don't have the answers other than I'm just gonna keep going and keep rocking. But I do see a cultural shift in which it's increasingly harder to get people to subscribe to the efforts needed to be successful.
Yeah. I think there's also like the degree of confusion between intensity and abuse. Like they're two different things. So a lot of the time, I think that obviously there's been kitchens that are not great in that degree, abusive and punishing and all those things. But there's also kitchens that have high levels of intensity of relentless pursuit of excellence, the long hours and all those things that are still highly respectful. You can have intensity, long hours, pressure, but still respect, right? I think a lot of that as well is um, skill set and training from the top down. There's an element of that I think is critical. It's like sharpening. It's like cutting something with a blunt knife. A blunt knife is more dangerous than a sharp one. It still cuts, but it's like it makes a mess of whatever you're cutting, including yourself eventually when it slips and bruises or cuts yourself. Um, I think we sometimes keep pushing harder and harder. I call it ambition, but don't realize that the effort without the edge is still isn't it's not just grit, it's like wasted motion, it's wasted energy. Um, and so I think a moment of taking a step back to realize that it's not the action, it's the need to sharpen the tool of ourselves and our own minds and our ability to it's not the pressure that's changed or the environment that needs to change, it's us and our ability to adapt and be okay with working in an intense environment because that's part of life, right? And whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't subscribe to the belief, and to be fair, like, I'm getting I don't enjoy the conversation of abuse because I feel it's a very targeted, pointed conversation that, by the way, needs to happen. I'm not saying that the conversation doesn't need to happen. It's a thousand million times inappropriate and unacceptable and doesn't belong in the home or workplace. That's not what I'm saying. I think I'm getting personally increasingly frustrated with the lines being blurred between, being wanting people to participate in an excellence and confusing that with abuse, right? And I've never blurred those lines, and I've never been accused of abuse, my entire career, but I've run very intense kitchens, and when I say intense, it's a bunch of individuals that believe in something very, very much and that hold themselves to high standards. And in that environment, voices could get raised. Um, you could physically move faster. There's a lot of things that suggest that there's intensity, which there is. There's intensity. Um, but I don't subscribe to the idea that, like, intensity is inherently abusive, and there's a huge distinction there, and I think often, like, these in conversations today that those lines get blurred a lot, and, I think, we could all do better at making it, easier workplaces, and I think that will come from inspiration and making feel like people that they're bought in. Right? Making people believe that they're participants in something that's really exciting and professional is where, you know, the kind of work does itself.
Hmm. Going back into, the pursuit of your dreams and having the courage to do something that might be questioned or challenged or critiqued, which is inevitable in this day and age, especially for the world of social media and whatever you do. I we stumbled across something about I think there was a negative comment from Margot Pierre White back in the day that had a shitty comment about Alinea being trickery, not real cooking, all this stuff. It was pretty harsh comment from someone who's obviously quite known in the industry. Um, how would you what sort of advice would you give to someone that's being critiqued or in preparation to be critiqued to that degree?
You're asking me what would my advice be to somebody who has been given criticism by somebody who's made a huge impact in an industry?
By anybody, really. Not necessarily just someone who's made that much of an impact in the industry, but, um, yeah.
Fuck what people think does not mean don't accept criticism. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is you need to be able as an individual who's on their own path, doing what they wanna do, and I keep saying the word unapologetic, like, my process is unapologetic. And I tell this to my team too, I'm not doing I'm you know, you the moment you start listening to other people's opinions that push you away from your idea and your goal, you're fucked. It's very think about it. It's impossible to kind of pull the pieces back together. You almost have to abandon the entire thought process or project in general if you're starting to allow like criticism to affect your process. Now, there's constructive criticism, right? There's criticisms that can be made daily and that can encourage, you know, the path to kind of manipulate itself, but still get to the end goal. And then there's the kind of criticism that just dismantles people. And I think, you know, I don't listen to anybody, as long as I believe that I try to do the homework and the preparation beforehand to make sure that I'm invested into whatever I'm going to invest in. Therefore, I can go at it. Like, I don't go into anything, like, haphazardly where I'm like, This could be a good idea," and then get murdered on it, and then be like so that's part of it too, but if you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, that's what always freaks people out, and to, like, go on, Marco's a legend, and I love Marco, and White Heat was you know, White Heat was like Kitchen Confidential back in the day. It's like one of those books, like French Laundry. It's just some of these books change the way inspire people to become who they wanted to be. And so, but you could have different legends and juggernauts that don't agree. And like that's a perfect example. Like Alenia's having their 20th or was it 25-year anniversary, they're wildly successful to this day. They didn't Grant didn't get there by wondering if people thought that he was being too progressive. I mean, they have 2 totally different cooking styles, so, of course, he's not gonna potentially gravitate towards it. I mean, I don't gravitate towards that food. I don't cook that food. I mean, I did for a while, but that was my responsibility, and we blew a lot of minds, and it was awesome, and I got what I needed out of it. Um, so so can't listen to the noise.
Two different audiences as well, I guess. Your peers versus your customer.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta be able to own what your philosophy is, and I think Marco's philosophy was probably with regard to how he perceived food and how he wanted food served differed from what Grant was doing, and that's fair, by the way. That doesn't necessarily mean one person's food is better than the others, but they don't align in terms of how they approach their processes. I assume that's pretty much what he was talking about, and also I assume that it just wasn't for him, which is also totally fair, you know?
Mike, what do you want to be known for when it's all done?
Just being original. I think to touch on, what we were just talking about with society and social media, and it's very easy to get watered down and subscribe to what you think other people might want and blah, blah, blah. Just I think what all I've ever wanted is just to be unique and original and have people ideally one day be like, "Man, that guy applied himself in a new way and it was cool." And, you know, leave my own mark, whether it's big or small, just wanna be unique.
I hear you. Easier said than done in today's world.
It should be the easiest thing.
Right. But in a realm of so many public opinions, I think uh, the majority of people are driven by fear over originality of what they actually want.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that mentality is a cheat code, right? You've got 8 billion people doing almost one thing, and then you've got this like elite small percentage of people that are fearlessly unapologetic. And I imagine there's a lot of success on a ton of failures, but I'm sure like the only way to get, true uniqueness and artistry and success is to like you got to separate from the herd.
Risk it all. Or is it even risk if you're that confident about it? Is it
Oh.
risk to everyone else, but not you?
I mean, you just have to risk not giving a fuck what people think, and then that just opens like a whole new like world.
Mm. What do you think it like, how do you get to that point? Like, what builds that certainty?
You just gotta have self-confidence, you don't have to be
And where's that come from?
narcissist.
Like, it's easy to say, just be fucking confident, but, like, what builds confidence, when you've been when you're not a confident person natively, what do you think is it that gets you there?
You need to surround yourself with people that you love, people who are inspiring, people that listen to you, right? People that respect your opinion. You have to be constantly, they always say like you can judge people by their friends, Like it's dude, it's like everything like you have to constantly be having positive thoughts, being around positive energetic people, but also being around people that are going to push you. Like I'm constantly trying to be around people who are smarter than me, more talented than me, more experienced than me. I'm trying to get involved with people that are making differences. Like it's a nonstop, and that builds confidence, right? You need to be able to feel confident taking risks. And in order to do that, you need to, alienate yourself from negativity. And also, like, be around like-minded individuals, that can hear you, say, "Hey, I wanna do this thing." And then maybe you have somebody next to you who's like, "Hey, I've done something similar. It's actually a good idea, blah, blah, blah," and you start conversations that, like, excite you. You gotta be excited about what you're doing. Otherwise, like, the world is a dark place, and the world does wanna eat you up, and it does wanna kick you out. And the 175 people that run the world don't want you to be a voice, and
Really? And what's the next move right now for you?
right now, just keep the brand going. Like I said, I'm gonna try to work on this other concept that we're working on right now.
New York, is that?
Yep, New York. And then I'm trying to continue my networking so that I can emerge in new thoughts. So like I'm working with different artists right now. Um, trying to stay really close to the New York City hub of thriving artists. And, I hang out with photographers and a bunch of design people, a lot of people that I know that are also trying to push new boundaries. So I like to leave a part of my life open to what ifs and like possibility while simultaneously making sure I'm on track to do the next thing in hospitality that I hope resonates.
Right. If you could distill all of your life experience, the good and the bad experiences, the learning from those into 3 ingredients of success, what do you think they would be?
Three ingredients of success. I would say culture is one. Like I think, you know, the best education is travel and like learning about other cultures. And that's a huge direct influence. It's kind of like cheat codes for life in a way. You travel to India, you travel to Japan, you travel to Mexico, and you work with these people, and you go to these indigenous communities or very populated communities of people who are that you get to learn about how they've operated for a long time. It could be really, really, really inspiring, um, and it has been. And then creativity is always my wheelhouse. I will never that's my benchmark. So, trying to be creative allows me to ideally be unique, which is what I'm after. And then these are all things we've talked about. I would say resiliency is the other thing. Those are the 3 things. Like resiliency is the thing that al is not easy to have, but it's important to continue to have thick skin and be resilient so that you can continue to absorb the things, the frustrations, the failures, the negativities, the criticisms, all the things that, you know, try to push people down. You gotta keep coming back. So,
Any final message you'd leave with our audience on that note?
I mean, I would say anybody that listened to this podcast, like hopefully, keep being you. Don't let the noise affect you. Keep pushing. Separate yourself from the herd and come visit me. Let me know if I can be a sounding board. Anybody who's listening and wants to hang, they'll have a home in New York City.